All right, let's all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. And at this point, we will move on to item number 3. Item number 3 is discussion and take possible action regarding a resolution to authorize, issue, and sell general obligation refunding bonds in an amount not to exceed $12 million. With us tonight, we have the town's underwriter, John Healy from Mesereau Financial, and town's bond counsel, Bruce Chudwick. So I'm going to turn it over to John or Bruce. I don't know who's going to go. First, do you have packets, which John is going to take us through, which will help answer any questions, and then we'll fill in any blanks that we may have as we go.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. First Selectman, and thank you very much for having me here this evening. I think that it would be helpful to everyone to give a little background on how we got to this point before we actually talk about the resolution itself. As you're all well aware, some of you very well aware, the state of Connecticut is still without a budget 3 months into the fiscal year. And right now we've been living under the governor's executive order, which, if taken to its full extent, would cut state aid to the town of Seymour to the tune of up to $8 million plus. So the first selectman, being the prudent planner that he is, asked us to come down and sit around a table right in the back of the room, along with folks from the town and the Board of Education, to discuss possible ways to plan for the worst case scenario. Now, this was back in July, I believe, or August. So there was still hope that we would have a budget before the executive order went into effect, really at least the October 1st ECS deadline. But we're here now. And so the first selectman was looking to come up with a multi-pronged approach to this. Not just, we're going to do a supplemental assessment, not just cuts, not just restructuring. How can we do a multi-pronged approach to this so that you do have that shared sacrifice that we hear so much about and so seldom see? So one of the things that so everyone around the table pledged a good faith effort to come up with a certain amount of savings. And so one of the things that we were tasked to do was say, look at the debt and see what we could do in order to restructure it. How much savings could we get there? Now, back in the actual session of the legislature, one of the items that was passed was a new law allowing municipalities to restructure their debt or refund existing debt out up to 30 years. Under the previous law, you could only take it out to not to exceed the original final maturity of that bond, of that debt. So this is a totally new world for municipalities, but it's a tool to be used, and be used responsibly, to be able to, again, as part of a multifaceted approach, manage your debt to allow the town to be able to absorb these types of unforeseen and draconian cuts. So that's how we got to this particular transaction that's in front of you right now, and it is a little warm here.
Sorry, just took the chill out. I just took the chill out. That's okay.
Sorry, John, I don't want you to melt.
No problem.
Now you're going to freeze.
So when we first looked at it, we actually were able to come up with something on the to the tune of about $4 million to $5 million worth of debt service savings every year. Now that would have required us taking out a lot of existing debt, and may not have been the most prudent thing, because obviously the more debt you take out and the longer you take it out, the more you're going to wind up costing the town. So you're trying to balance getting that debt service savings, getting that relief in not just next fiscal year, but you're going to need relief for the next few fiscal years to be able to absorb whatever new reality we have from the state. So rather than look at the $4 to $5 million solution, we went back and forth. We worked with finance, we worked with Tony, we worked with the first selectman, and basically we were tasked to solve for finding about $2 million in savings for the next 2 fiscal years, and then having a little bit of savings after that, while not saddling future administrations with an enormous spike in debt service. That was the task that we had, and that's how we came to this transaction in front of you right now. What we have, if you go to page 3, skip page 2, if you go right to page 3, we'll come back to page 2. we've got two different components to this transaction. We've got a tax exempt and a taxable. The reason why we have a taxable portion of this is because some of the debt that we are looking to restructure has already been refunded before. And under current law, you cannot refund an issue twice on a tax-exempt basis. So we are going to have to go taxable on a portion of this. Now, on the bright side, the taxable rates and the tax-exempt rates have never been closer. So you're not seeing a huge penalty with having to go taxable. The bright side with going taxable is that you have a lot more flexibility in what you can do with those proceeds than you do if you're tax-exempt. On the tax-exempt side, those are issues that have, or securities that have not been refunded before, and so those we will be doing on a tax-exempt basis. I assure you that we have looked under every stone and worked with bond counsel to make sure that the majority, or the most we can do on a tax-exempt basis, we are doing. But it would be a $10 million par amount, so $6,575,000 in tax-exempt, $3,425,000 taxable. Remember that this is a restructuring, not a refunding. So we are not doing this for instant present value savings. We're doing this for debt service savings over the coming years. And you will see that if you go to page 4. So if you look in the far right-hand column, where it says present value savings versus DIS savings, you'll see if we were able to undertake this transaction on the schedule that we have proposed to the town, which would be to price somewhere in early December, closing 1 week. Hello? There we go. Then we believe that we could generate in the current fiscal year a little over $1 million worth of savings in debt service, which would then give you that flexibility throughout the rest of your budget. And then 1.9 million, 1.9 million the following 2 fiscal years, dropping down to 58 million, and then we get into the DIS savings. If you look at the 4th column in where it says existing debt service, and then compare that to the 2 columns to its right, so impact from the tax-exempt component and impact from the taxable component, you'll see that there is not an appreciable jump, certainly not anything beyond 100,000 or 200,000 in the out years, which if you've ever done a refunding or restructuring, typically there is always some sort of big piece of pain in there. We have really endeavored to try to smooth that out as much as possible so that so future generations, future boards of selectmen, future first selectmen don't have to pay a penalty for this, but this does give you the ability to budget appropriately for the next 3 to 4 years to bring you in line with that new state reality. One of the things that makes Seymour unique and makes a lot of municipalities in Connecticut unique is we have a rapid amortization of debt. So one of the things that we wanted to look at, and one of the things that the rating agencies really key on, is making sure that you've got debt coming off the books relatively rapidly. So in doing this restructuring, what we didn't want to do is take Seymour's very good amortization rate and throw that in the trash. So we held ourselves to 60% of principal retired within 10 years. So we're able to accomplish all these things while still not spiking debt service in the out years, while still maintaining, as far as S&Ps and Moody's are concerned, a rapid amortization of debt, and getting you guys the savings that's needed. One of the other things that we've been looking at, and I know is probably in your minds too, is how the rating agencies are going to view municipalities that are undertaking transactions using this statute. We have not had any municipalities do that yet. We are seeing municipalities ramping up right now, but Seymour would be toward the vanguard of that, and I think that there's a premium for that. The way that we would approach it with the rating agencies, and the way that we've discussed with the first selectman, of explaining this not only to you but to the rating agencies and the public writ large, is this really is a hedge. It's a hedge play. Right now, we don't know what that eventual budget document will look like. I can poll the entire board. You will all probably give me slightly different answers. If we have a budget that holds or that winds up dinging the town to the tune that the governor's executive order does, then this transaction plans for that. It basically protects the town, gives you flexibility going forward without penalizing you in the long run. If, however, a budget is negotiated that either holds the town harmless or comes in somewhere between where the governor is and where you were last year, then what we would propose, and what the first selectman has proposed, is still doing this transaction, but then taking whatever proceeds are not needed in order to fill the gap and give you the flexibility that you need in the budget. And rather than putting that into operating, putting that into addressing the town's contingent liabilities on pension and OPEB. This board was prescient enough to create an OPEB trust not too long ago. In order for that trust to start doing what it's intended to do, you really need an initial infusion to build the corpus so that it can start spinning off interest, and so that you're just using the interest on the trust and not touching the principal. And the reduction in your ARC payment that's required will give you additional budget relief. And the rating agencies are going to be big thumbs up on that. So I think that even though that this is a hedge for the town, regardless of what happens with the budget, I think it's also a hedge on your rating. And when we see towns, some towns who deserve it, who are getting put on negative watch or getting downgraded by Moody's and S&Ps recently, one thing I don't want to see happen is that Seymour, who has been a great steward of the public fisc, who has brought your rating back up to AA plus stable, you shouldn't be dinged for something that was beyond your control and that, frankly, we had tried to plan for, right? I mean, when we went to the rating agencies in May, not only did we put the best face forward for the town, I believe, but we also stress tested the town, saying, well, if in a doomsday scenario the state budget gets cut by 5% or state aid gets cut by 5%, see, the town will be fine. We run that number. But let's say it gets cut by 10%. Never going to happen, right? We're still fine. There was never a contemplation that it would be cut by such a drastic amount. And the thing that worries me is that you look at what Moody's criteria was for putting those 26 towns yesterday on negative watch, or excuse me, review for downgrade. They put another 25 on negative watch. If they had applied that criteria to Seymour, I worry about where we would have come out, because it was a very simple criteria. If the governor's cut, or the reduction in state aid, was in excess of your fund balance, you got put on that RUR list. It's not a secret. You guys have an $8+ million reduction according to the governor's budget. We have an audited fund balance of $6 million and change, which was very healthy before this executive order. So I think that taking a proactive step here, really planning for the future, hedging both ways without penalizing the town, is a very, very smart position. And this is the transaction that we're putting forward before you today. On page 2, going back, we just wanted to bring to your attention that you have a set of 2010B bonds that are out there. They are not currently callable now, but in 2020 they will be. And that means that they will be highly efficient and perfect refunding candidates at that time. And so we thought it would be helpful to show you not just what the transaction, the restructuring transaction would result in, but if you go to page 5 now, sorry to have you flipping around, and you look at that far right-hand column, you will see that the overall present value savings to the town jumps up, and we're able to, in 2020, we're able to smooth out that impact even further. So that's what the plan would be to do this restructuring, then in 2020, do a current refunding of those bonds, use it to smooth out the entire thing. Again, we're trying to check every box here. We think we've got a transaction that does it. We think that the market timing is right on this. We think that it's helpful to be among the first towns going out there to do this, especially as a financially healthy town and not a financially weakened town that needs this transaction. And so with that, I'll turn over to bond counsel if you have anything to add.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Chudwick. I'm with the law firm of Shipman & Goodwin. We're very pleased to be able to serve you as bond counsel to the town. And my role tonight is to describe and explain the resolution that I think is in your packages. It should be a 2-pager, 7 sections. It's called Resolution to Authorize, Issue, and Sell General Obligation Refunding Bonds. This is the resolution that we would request that you take a look at and hopefully adopt by at least 5 affirmative votes under the statute that John was just referring to. In order to do a refunding and go out beyond up to 30 years or 25 years, we need to have a 2/3 vote of the entire board in order to do that. That's sort of the compromise position that I think the legislature agreed upon, as opposed to just a simple majority. It needs a 2/3 vote of the board to approve this. But let me just walk through it briefly. Section 1 describes the bonds, and you're authorizing general obligation refunding bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $12 million. John indicated in his presentation and also in your handouts that the par amount is anticipated to be about $10 million. But we always like to add in a little extra cushion for that in case the market moves away from the town and we need to sell some additional bonds, or if we find additional refunding candidates that would be beneficial for the town to refund to enhance the savings. So we always recommend adding a little bit more than what the presentation indicates, because that way you have the flexibility to go ahead and get the transaction done in the market if it changes a little bit between now and December. So the authorization would be to issue an amount not to exceed $12 million to refund all or any portion of the outstanding bonds of the town. That's Section 1. Section 2 authorizes and delegates to the first selectman and treasurer to, in essence, do all the required pieces of the transaction: size the transaction, determine the structure, and how the bonds will be sold, either on a competitive basis or a negotiated basis, and allow the two of them to move forward to get the transaction done. Section 3 provides that the amounts that are bonded through this refunding bond issue have to go into escrow. So they'll go into an escrow account and sit there until they're used to pay off the old bonds. That's the standard restructuring or refunding debt that takes place in any municipality. While they're sitting in escrow, they have to be held in very safe securities, so either U.S. Treasuries or some type of governmental obligation, so that you know that the old bondholders will get paid off when those bonds come due. That's Section 3. Section 4 authorizes the first selectman and treasurer to issue offering documents, a preliminary official statement and a final official statement, to talk to the marketplace about what's happening in the town, and to issue and to sign a continuing disclosure agreement in connection with the issuance of the bonds. Section 5 talks about the tax certificate and tax compliance agreement. Again, the first selectman and treasurer would determine the split between the taxable tax-exempt pieces and sign these documents for the tax-exempt portions. Section 6 allows provides that some of these bonds can be sold on a taxable basis, it being determined that that is in the public interest. That's in the Connecticut statutes, in that if a municipality wants to issue taxable debt, they have to find that that is in the public interest. And as John indicated, that would be in this transaction because it does generate savings, and since the spreads right now between taxable and tax exempts is so minimal, it would be in the public interest to issue the taxable bonds as part of this transaction. And finally, the first selectman and treasurer are authorized to appoint different folks: the certifying agent, transfer agent, paying agent, and registrar for the bonds, and to do everything else needed in order to do the bond issue in conjunction with the professionals that they've engaged. So that's the resolution for your consideration. Thank you, members of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. First Selectman, and be happy to address any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you.
John or Bruce, I don't know could you talk about the type of sale that we're going to do, so that way you understand the options that the town will have if rates change, situations change, that we can make changes actually right up into the last second?
Sure. What has been proposed is that we would undertake this transaction on a negotiated basis, which basically means that you're selecting an underwriter ahead of time, and then we work with the town to set a sale date. We work toward that sale date, checking all the boxes, getting a rating, going through the process, doing our due diligence, doing the disclosure documents, everything like that. But if we get to that sale date and there's a rogue tweet, or there is something else that sends the markets, somewhere we didn't expect them to be, or sends treasury rates somewhere we didn't expect them to be, we have full flexibility to say, we're going to pick up our flag and plant it somewhere else. We'll price it another time. On the converse, if on the run-up to pricing, we're 2 days away from it, 3 days away from it, and the market is phenomenal, and we've got all the ducks in a row, we can accelerate pricing in order to take advantage of a favorable market. With a refunding or restructuring as opposed to new money, you are kind of watching two things. You're watching, the bond markets, but you're also watching the treasury markets, because you are going to probably be using slugs to fund those escrows. So multifaceted, but going negotiated, we believe, gives the town the ultimate degree of flexibility, as opposed to, public sale where you have to plant your flag in the ground, and you're running an auction that day basically for the securities. And but if the market moves away from you, or if something else happens, you don't have the flexibility. You can't just take your ball and go home.
Thank you, John. Okay, anyone have any questions? Anything that they're not sure about, anything you want anything to go back over?
Just to kind of put it in layman's terms here, I'm not a finance guy. Johnny knows that. So dumb it down for me a little bit. What is this going to mean for the taxpayers in the immediate term and more in the long term,
Sure.
in layman's terms?
Well, you've got to work under two hypotheticals here, though. So if you have a reduction in state aid, there's only really three ways to address that. That's you tax more, you spend less, or you restructure your existing obligations, whether that's debt, labor contracts, whatever. This prevents or mitigates the need for the town to have to issue a supplemental tax bill, or a larger supplemental tax bill, and make even more drastic cuts. So if it's about trying to preserve services that the people of Seymour really deserve, because, again, this situation is not of their making, then this is the way we believe that's most equitable on all fronts, to be able to preserve the current level of services without soaking the taxpayer, and also without burdening future generations of Seymour taxpayers for the cost of this restructuring.
Okay, so to kind of sum it up in basic terms here, this is, in your opinion, in your firm's opinion, this is the best way for us to most efficiently protect our constituents from whatever's happening at the Capitol right now.
Yes, we believe that it's the most prudent course right now. There's a school of thought that could say, well, ride it out, wait to see what the final product is. But the problem then becomes, then you're dealing with an absolute certainty. And if it's a great certainty, if it's positive, terrific. But I think that at this point we can probably all agree, and Representative Claire DeStitria might assent to this. It's going to be painful in some form. And so it's just a question of how can you best protect the town today for whatever eventuality will happen, without going too far one way or too far another. And this is, I think, a very reasonable, measured approach to doing that. And I think, like I said, I think it checks all the boxes.
And again, when John had talked at the beginning about the three-pronged approach that we had decided that the first $2 million would be absorbed through a series of cuts between the municipal side and the Board of Education side, which we actually have. The next $2 million would be covered by this restructuring of our debt, and then the last $4 million, if we had to go there, would be covered by the special tax. Now, if things change and a budget is passed, as John said, where the town is held harmless or cuts are not as drastic, we have a plan in place, as John explained, of what we'll do with this money. So we'll take these savings and we'll reinvest it in different areas that will benefit Seymour down the road. So we'll look at our OPEB trust. We will increase the size of our mill rate stabilization to allow us to keep the mill rate flat for years to come. We can make different investments into roads. We can do things like buy fire trucks and cash. So we're going to use any excess that's there to better the town in the long run. It's not going to be used for tax relief. That's a concern of S&P. They think that we're just going to take this money, bear it right back into the mill rate and save money that way, and that's not what they want to hear. So we're going to try to keep the mill rate as level as possible by controlling our long-term expenses. So again, our plan going into this, before this all happened, was our mill rate would remain relatively level for the next 3 years. The state funding obviously has thrown that off, but we're working to try to keep that in place with these plans. So, any other questions, comments?
Thank you. I think this presentation was great, and I think this is an important move for the town of Seymour that I'm sure other towns and cities will follow, because it's giving us as much protection as we can possibly have in such a uncertain time with our state. So I commend you for doing this and taking care, being fiscally responsible and doing the right thing. So, thank you. I think this is it's a great move for us. It'll protect us, and if for some reason we don't have draconian cuts, then we do have something to do with that excess money that will still, with our OPEB and our pension plan. So, good job.
I think a lot of the credit, too, goes to John and his partner, Dick Theobridge, who's not with us tonight. Dick has been with us for 30 years, I believe. He's been the town's financial advisor, so they know the town's finances intimately, so they're able to make these suggestions, but understand what we're trying to accomplish. So, having a good partnership with an investment firm like this has certainly been very beneficial. And then Bruce's work on the mix of the taxable and non-taxable has certainly helped out and given us a little bit more flexibility. Bruce actually helped kind of push through some of this legislation, so with his partner, Matt Ritter. That certainly worked out. But all right, any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, can I just ask, sorry, just because I'm not a finance guy either, can you explain a little bit what the difference between the total savings into savings versus the present value savings into savings is? On page 4 or 5.
Yes, again, the difference between the total savings account, the second from the right column, is the gross amount of savings. Those are the actual dollars that the town would either have in savings in those years or additional costs. But the better way to look at that is to do it on a net present value basis, is you discount it back in today's dollars. And the far right-hand column, you see up above, it says at 2.991%. So you take those savings from that second column from the right and discount it at that rate. That shows you what the true present value would be if in today's dollars. And that's the way that the market and what issuers really should look at. Because that'll show you if we did it today and had those dollars today, how much would the savings be? And that's where the $247,000 in savings comes from. Even though in the long run you're paying more, the value today of having those savings is greater than having this savings in the out years.
So the 2,991, is that an assumed interest rate, or is that kind of the
What
locked in?
John? What interest rate? What interest rate is this assumed that for the second to the right column? That's a 2.99, right? 2.991, right?
And that's what we expect to pay over the life.
And that's based on the October 9th, 2017 rates you see down at the bottom of the page.
Yep.
So again, what rates will be when we price the bonds in December will govern how that's going to roll out, but hopefully the rates will come down and the savings will be more.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Everyone's good? Okay, so I'm sorry? Oh. Hey, Tom, grab the mic just so.
Well, I mean, when we looked at this, it was quite a shock to us what would happen. And this gives us an opportunity to actually control or be capable to control the things that we can't control, which he demonstrated through our planning. But now we're dealing with things that we can't control. And this gives us the best option to control what happens to the stability of our functions and systems within the town, and also creates a stable mill rate. So this right now is our best option to control what we have, and that's really what this is about. We don't want to lose any ground for all the things that we've done, and we also don't want to burden the taxpayers with any fiscal spikes that could occur from governor's proposals. So I just want you to know that this gives us an opportunity to really at least absorb what happened and control it, rather than react and try to do something radical that's not going to be good for any of us, really.
Thank you, Tony. So, Bruce, for the resolution, do I need to read the entire thing into the record, or?
No, you don't,
So
Mr.
the
Selectman.
resolution is
If you just have a motion second to adopt the resolution titled Resolution to Authorize, Issue, and Sell General Obligation Refunding Bonds, noting that this resolution will be part of the minutes of the meeting.
Okay.
So just the title of the resolution will be fine, so that's all you need to read.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so at this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution to authorize, issue, and sell general obligation refunding bonds as presented by bond counsel Bruce Chudwick, and that resolution will be attached to the minutes in the record. Motion by Len, second by Al. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, just a question. Kurt, do you believe that this is in any way kicking the can down the road?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not.
All right.
And the reason I say that, because it gives us options as to what we're going to do. I think if we waited to see what would happen, I think it's going to turn into, for lack of a better term, a bum rush to try to get money.
Yeah.
I think we're going to end up paying substantially more. Do I think that we're going to end up with the governor's cuts of $8 million? I don't. But I think we would be going out to whether it be refunding or restructuring at some point, whether this happened or not. So we're just using this as a tool to provide us more options. If these cuts are substantially less, and I'm going to talk about the governor's latest budget in a minute, this is going to give us a tremendous amount of flexibility to use present dollars, as Bruce had mentioned, to address our long-term obligations. So we'll actually be saving substantial amounts of money down the road. And that's something that Tony, Doug, and I wrestled with, handcuffing, whether it be the next first selectman, the next Board of Selectmen, with essentially kicking the can down the road. We could have gotten substantially more with this refunding. They had an option that was up to almost $4 million. That would have absolutely kicked the can down the road and handcuffed the next person, so we don't want to do that.
Okay. Follow-up, who will decide, or who will have a say in deciding if the budget comes back favorable for us on what we do with this refunding money?
Myself and the treasurer.
Okay.
And obviously with consultation with Bruce and John, Doug and Tony. But, you know, again, I think my background kind of gives me a good perspective with the finance, what's good, what's not. So,
Okay.
but I mean, I'll be honest with you. If something happens between now and when we're actually going to go out, I would certainly bring it back to a selectmen meeting to discuss it, or at least give you guys an update if something were to change. So. Comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Chair votes aye, motion passes 6-0. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your hard work and effort.
Thank you, great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, public comment. Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Hearing no public comment, we'll move on to item number 5. Are you really? Are you? All right then. It's not like it's your first time, so walk it over. Walk it over.
Sashay it over.
I'm not going to sing Gordon Light for tonight. I just think it's great that you guys are doing this. You put a
Name
lot
and
of-
address for the
Oh,
record, please.
Sean
Mr.
Walsh, 126 Pearl Street. My only concern, I look at this and it may be laughable to an extent, but when I looked at the way the governor did his breakdown, it seems on all of his budgets, it seems like he almost is penalizing the towns that were more fiscally responsible. So I just hope that these amendments that we're making and changes to our budget don't now turn around and when he relooks and goes, well, look, Seymour made a better choice to save even more money, let me cut more money from them. So hopefully with Nicole's hard work up at the Capitol, they keep that from coming. I just don't want to see this get, the more work we do, the harder we get kicked. So hopefully you guys can know that this will benefit us and not hurt us.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? No other public comment? Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, which is approve the minutes from the October 3rd, 2017 regular meeting. Can I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Motion by Len, second by Anne Marie. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Chair votes aye, motion passes 6-0. Next item is item number 6, which is First Selectmen's Report. I just want to give you an update on the latest budget that was put out by our governor. This budget shows the town of Seymour receiving a cut of 1.194 million, which is obviously substantially less than the executive order cuts that he had talked about. But this does not include the special education grant money that goes directly to the Board of Education. That ranges anywhere between $600,000 and $900,000 each year, depending on the year and kind of what's going on. So this budget that the governor's put out is about a $2 million cut overall to the town of Seymour. Discussions or just conversations and things, my understanding is that this budget of the governor has absolutely no support on either side of the aisle. that the legislators in both the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, are working very hard to try to come up with a budget that will be passable by both chambers, and hopefully one that is veto-proof so the governor cannot have his hands on it. Actually, Bruce's partner is Matt Ritter, who is the majority leader, so he's actually up in those conversations. I had hoped that he would be here today so he can maybe give us some insight on the conversations. I know I get a lot of information from the minority leader, but it just would give a little different feel to that. So, but a couple other things I want to keep in mind, and I talked a little bit about, stop laughing down there, you two, the the current executive order, which is what we need to defend. Right now, the first $2 million will be addressed by cuts. It's roughly $1.4 million in cuts to the Board of Education, $600,000 to the municipal side. Then second $2 million will be covered by this bond refunding, and then the last $4 million will be covered by the special tax if we needed to get that far. Just some updates on our overall finances. Fiscal year 17, we had a planned surplus of $300,000 through our mill rate stabilization account. Through the hard work of Doug and Tony and a few other people, we actually have a surplus in the neighborhood of $850,000 for fiscal year 2017. So that puts us in a strong cash position where we could absorb some of the potential cash flow issues without having to touch our fund balance. I've also had Doug run the trend analysis for fiscal year 18. We're very early into the year, but as of now, we are running about $900,000 of a surplus. Again, $400,000 of that was already planned. So if those numbers all hold out, and I'm not sure they will, I mean, again, we're only a quarter of the year in, and it's just a trend analysis, but we could have roughly $1.6 million in cash on hand to be able to use to absorb any lost revenue to help with cash flow issues. That's honestly my biggest concern. If we stay on the present course and nothing changes, as I had said before, the town of Seymour will start to have cash flow issues at some point in mid to late February. But this $1.6 million will actually keep us afloat if we needed to use that money, depending on how long this process drags on. So, just wanted to give everybody an update. As I hear more, I'll certainly pass that information on, but I know they are working very hard to try to get a budget done. So, any questions on any of that? Excellent. Item number 7, discussion and take possible action regarding charter revision changes from the Board of Selectmen. Okay, a couple meetings ago, everybody got a charter, so everyone had the opportunity to review. I've had conversations with some of you regarding some changes and some different things. The Charter Revision Commission, and Brian is here, Brian is actually working with the Charter Revision Commission to get this process done. I wanted to give the Board of Selectmen the opportunity to make suggestions to the Charter Revision Commission. Now, I'm not sure that we need to spend a tremendous amount of time on the detail of these recommendations. I think it should be more about what we're interested in them looking at and giving them a little direction.
Right.
So as an example, if we were to talk about whether it be term limits or changes to the length of terms, I think we should probably just say something like there should be term limits, we should look at it over a couple terms, and we should extend the length of terms, but not really hone in on numbers per se.
Yeah.
Let them know that these are things that we think are important, things that they should be considering, and let them have those discussions, come up with that detail, and then have those conversations directly with the people. That way it's not just what our will is imposed on them. These are people that are essentially outsiders for the vast majority for them from the political process, not involved in boards. They represent the people, so let's let the people have the say as to what they want.
Yeah,
So,
I agree, but I don't think we should get in the weeds and direct them what to do, but give them more big picture
right.
questions and general input and let them wrestle with it. That's their charge.
Because I think in conversations, like I said, with a lot of you, I think we're all relatively on the same page with the stuff that we would like to see moving forward. So I don't know how we want to do this, if we want to have an open discussion, if we want to start at one end of the table, have that person kind of talk about what they want, and then just kind of openly discuss it. Do we want to bounce around? I don't know what the preference is. I have about 3.5 pages worth of changes and things. So if no one has a preference, why don't we start, Stefan, with you at that end, because I know Stefan has some stuff that he wants to go through. But I would ask, if you're going to talk about a specific section of the charter, just list that out, number one, so it's easier for Rory to keep track of, so the Charter Revision Commission can see our minutes and know what we're talking about, but more importantly, other members can go to that section of the charter and look at what you're talking about specifically, so.
I would prefer to defer my time, considering most of my changes are already public record.
Okay, sounds good. Len, no? All right, Al, anything you wanna, I mean, if not, I'll jump in and go down my list, I don't, because I really haven't said anything publicly. So, about 3 or 4 months ago, Rory and I actually went through the charter and kind of came up with some general goals, and then we went through and we actually broke down by different sections. So, the first goal that we had was reducing the size of volunteer municipal government. You know, our recommendation is to cap permanent standing boards to 5 members. One of the things that we struggle with is finding people to be on these boards. And what we find is we end up having multiple people, or, excuse me, one person on multiple boards. People get tired. It's the same people making all the decisions. If we had less people on a board, we can spread people out. I think people would be more effective. You know, we want to ensure quality of candidates for public office by removing unnecessary partisan restrictions. You know, I think we should truly be focused on the best people to fill the boards, the voluntary boards, not the elected boards, but the voluntary boards, the best people to do the job. The example I use is Culture and Arts. I believe every person on the Culture and Arts Commission is a Democrat, and that's 100% fine, because those ladies do a great job. So it shouldn't be about their party affiliation, it should be about their ability to do the job. I think there should be a general goal, establish a procedure for removal of elected officials who are derelict in their duties. So if people are not doing the job that they are supposed to be, there should be something in the charter that protects the community from that, particularly if one of the things we're going to talk about is extending the limits on some of these boards. So if someone would, if a term would be extended from 2 to 4 years, as an example, I think there needs to be a mechanism in there to have someone removed. We need to strike, obviously, the redundant and unnecessary and outdated sections, which there are actually a lot. And then I think we need to add a chain of succession in case of a catastrophe. I know that's probably a little cliche.
Designated survivor.
But there you go, there's the, the perfect thing. I mean, God forbid something were to happen, we need to make sure that the government of the town of Seymour continues to move forward, so, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So, with that, I guess we'll just start, well, I guess that's kind of generally it. The biggest thing in the initial chapters, which talks about the size of the different boards, I think that the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, and the Board of Finance should be 7. I think every board other than that should be only 5. Again, that's just my opinion. Obviously, those are the 3 most impactful boards in town. Those should be the largest. The rest should be smaller. Again, just my opinion.
And so why do you feel that way? Do you want to talk about what your reasoning is behind it? Because you might run into quorum issues and things of that nature.
Well, again,
5-person, so I'm just curious.
you could potentially run into that, but I would rather it's smaller and the people are more focused and they're going to work together as opposed to just trying to fill slots. And I feel some of these boards are that way.
Yeah.
You know, the library board has 9 members to manage the library, yet the Board of Selectmen, which manages and oversees the entire town, only has 7. It just doesn't make sense. You know, if anything, I can make the argument there should be 9 on the Board of Selectmen, but I'm not sure we want to go that way either. So, yeah, with that one, we need a bigger table, so, or a second row.
A bigger boot.
Yeah. So, you know, Board of Education, again, reduce 7 members to 9. That's Chapter 6. The library directors, Chapter 5, reduce from 9 down to 5. In Chapter 7, 7.5, passage of ordinances. You may do whatever you like.
Don't say that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just,
Because we know where he's gonna go back to. Please.
yeah. Look at him smiling and, yeah, talk into the mic, please, because my mother will yell. She honestly will yell.
I just want to inquire, I don't know if you're going to get to this, but with the board sizes, are you going to be discussing the terms of them and whether they're going to be staggered or leave that to the board, the Charter Revision Commission rather? For instance, with the Board of Education, now you have a 9-member board, I believe, with 4-year terms, and the statutes have very detailed rules, 3, 6, 9, or 12 members, and then, having 6-year terms or 2, 4, 6.
Mm-hmm.
2, 3, 4, 6-year terms. Very complicated with Board of Ed. So I don't know if you want to continue staggered terms on just the Board of Ed or any boards, or some may need to have staggered terms. I believe the Board of Ed needs to stagger its terms under the statute. I have to take a look at that.
Yeah, I know we have staggered terms on the Board of Finance, so I would expect that the staggered terms would continue.
You would expect, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I'm just going to go through the sections, and you guys can and see them in there. On Chapter 7 for our board, 7.5, the passage of ordinances. Publish notices of ordinance changes rather than text in its entirety. Currently, when we publish an ordinance, it has to go into the newspaper, the entire ordinance, word for word. So when we passed the couple of the ordinances that we did last year, one was the, I know we teased Karen, about sex shops and things like that. That thing cost us several $1,000s to put in the newspaper. When we update the blight ordinance to put that in, it costs several $1,000s a
You're
year.
thinking about getting it more tech-savvy?
Yeah,
Getting it
so-
further up to modern day?
Well, just so we can publish that there was a change in the ordinance and then direct them to, whether it be the website or somewhere else, so we don't have to publish that in the
More
newspaper.
cost-effective,
Yeah. Let's see. There is, in Section 8, this wouldn't be for me, so I would have this written in for whoever it was to follow me. Section 1.8, remove the prohibition on the first selectman from holding other elected offices. That's a conversation that has taken place in other communities to allow their mayor, first selectman to serve as whether it be a state rep or a state senator. I think that's just a conversation that the Charter Revision Commission should have. And again, I'm not saying that for myself. That should take effect with whoever follows me. Chapter 8 on the Board of Police Commissioners, Section 8A1, composition and general powers and duties. Remove the 4th paragraph. And the 4th paragraph says the successors to the current chief until he has signed a contract, and replace with the language, the chief shall be required a 3-year contract, which will detail the terms of his employment. So the current charter talks about the next chief having to sign a contract. We currently have a chief who currently has a contract. So I think we need to update the language that simply says the chief shall be required to sign a contract, period. And then we move on. I think we should strike paragraph 5 and paragraph 6. We no longer have the captain and the lieutenant position, so I think those should be removed from the charter. Chapter 8B, Planning and Zoning Commission. I think the Planning and Zoning Commission should be returned to an appointed board as opposed to an elected board. And I believe that the party requirements for vacancy appointments should be removed for planning and zoning as well. I think that we should have the best 5 people on a board like that. Same with inland wetlands. These are specialized boards. It takes a very specific understanding, and I don't think we should have to have a person on there just because of a party affiliation. If the person is good, I think that's the person we should choose. Skipping down to Chapter 10 for the appointed boards. I think boards that should be looked at, and some of these have already been talked about. Economic Development Commission, I think we should have some updates to that board, perhaps giving it a little bit more authority or somehow combining with language in an ordinance. I think we should remove the Parks Commission and the Recreation Commission completely from the charter and replace it with the Community Services Commission. We have kind of merged that and broken down those silos just with our set operations. I think there should be one board that essentially sits on top of that and manages our recreation and our parks. I don't think it should be two separate entities.
Makes sense.
I also think we should remove the Committee on the Aging and merge that in with the Livable Communities Commission. I think instead of having two separate boards, again, that work on very similar things, I think it would make more sense to bring these two boards together, have them work together. I think there should be a removal of the Sewer Use Rate Review Board. There should be a removal of the Redevelopment Agency. And I think the Culture and Arts Commission should be removed from the charter. Just the Redevelopment Agency. And then remove the Culture and Arts Commission references from the charter. I'm not saying eliminate the board. I think they do a very good job. But I think that should just be combined with existing language we already have in the ordinance. Section 10.1.1, list of appointed offices in terms of office. Replace the Civil Defense Director with Emergency Management Director. So again, it's changing in the wording. I know that we're discussing that within the ordinance process as well, but I think we should make those references to the charter. Economic Development Commission. Reduce the membership down to 5, and again, give it a little bit more authority similar to what the Public Works Board has. Fire Commissioners, which is Section 10.7, change the composition of the board, the complete makeup, to be 1 member supplied by each firehouse, 1 member of the Board of Selectmen.
Is that
Yeah,
10?
slow down a
Slow
bit.
down a little. We can't
Oh.
write that fast.
Sorry.
How many words do you type per minute, Marie?
So
Don't
go
you
back
have a
to-
copy of this, right? I'm just reading right off my copy. Yeah.
But 10.7 is the
10.7.
Board of Fire Commissioners. And
Commissioners.
you want to do what?
I
One
want-
from each firehouse?
I want to change the composition of the board to the following.
Yep.
1 member from each house, 1 member of the Board of Selectmen, 1 member of the Board of Finance, and the Fire Chief.
But the Board of Fire Commissioners now is made up of,
2 members from each house and 1 person that's assigned by the Board of Selectmen. For 5.
okay.
Emergency Medical Services Oversight Commission. I think that should be removed completely from the charter. MSOC was put in 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when we were having substantial issues with Seymour Ambulance and their finances. We need to have a mechanism in place to oversee them coming back into proper fiscal health. I think they have certainly proved their value. They are required to have audits every year. This board only meets twice a year to simply review the audit. They have no other say in that. We now have a contract with Seymour Ambulance, which we didn't have in the past, so I don't think there's a need for that board. There should be some changes to the Housing Authority. And that's basically just to strike some redundant language and things like that. Section 10.10 on the Parks Commission. Again, we had talked about combining that in with Community Services. 10.12, the Recreation Commission. Combine again with the Community Services Commission, as discussed earlier, and change all references of the Recreation Director in the charter to the Community Services Director or his or her designee. In section 10.13, which is the Board of Public Works, I just want to, so I can give you the regular language. Just bear with me 1 second. 10.13 in the 4th paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4. In conjunction with the town engineer. So this talks about the responsibility for planning, surveying, construction, reconstruction, altering paving, repairing, maintaining, and so on and so forth. I think that the town engineer should be weighing in and assisting the Public Works Board with that information. Water Pollution Control Authority. again, which is 10.14. Hold on, let me find that. You guys can jump in at any time.
No, we like listening to you talk.
You're doing a great job, Kirk.
Thank you.
Yep, keep up the good work.
In the second paragraph, strike from the authority shall work. So essentially the last sentence of that paragraph should be taken out. So the authority shall work with the Sewer Use Rate Review Board in determining the fee it charges customers for the use of the sewers. I think with the changes that have been made, that should come out. And then in paragraph 3, second sentence, it talks about the budget that shall be prepared and how that should work. The current language, the budget shall be prepared on or before April 1st for the subsequent year beginning July 1st and shall be submitted to the Board of Selectmen for approval at the first Board of Select meeting held after May 1st. I think that language should be changed, that the budget shall be prepared on or before July 1st and shall be submitted to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. I think the fourth and fifth sentences should be struck from the charter. Section 10.15, Commission on the Aging. Again, I think that should be removed from the charter and combined with the Livable Communities Commission. Okay? Okay.
Good idea.
So I was hoping there'd be some. Section 10.17, Town Council and Assistant Town Council, that they should be able to keep up with the first selectman when he's speaking. I think that should be first line in the charter. That's right.
And a salary reduction.
Yeah.
Engagement.
Yeah, slow down. All right, so in paragraph 4, there's just a typo, insure, which is energy replacement drink as opposed to insure.
Yeah.
Section 10.19 on the town treasurer. I just would like that language looked at just to tighten that up a little bit. Again, section 10.12, sewer use rate review board, strike the entire section.
10.21.
10.21. Strike that entire section. 10.22, which is the redevelopment agency, strike that entire section, excuse me. Civil Defense Director, as I mentioned, replace all references of Civil Defense Director to Emergency Management Director, which is 10.23. And then 10.25, which is the Culture and Arts Commission, reduce to 5 members. If it stays in the charter, I would like it completely removed, but if it stays in the charter, reduce to 5 members, and remove any references to the Strand Theater, because the town of Seymour no longer has any affiliation with the Strand Theater. Section 12, which is where I think they're going to spend the vast majority of their time, which has to do with the town finances or finance and taxation, excuse me. 12.3, the annual town meeting. I think at this point the annual town meeting is of a little value.
Yeah.
I can't recall the last time we actually had a quorum
I do.
at the annual town meeting.
It's when we have to talk about fire trucks and stuff like that. That's when we get people at our town meeting. It was a
No, I'm talking about the budget town meeting,
Oh, the
not
budget,
just the
yeah.
town meeting in general, yeah.
All right.
I think that we should remove all references to the annual town meeting for the budget, not just town meetings, just for the budget.
Yeah.
That when the Board of Finance finishes its job, it should be sent directly to the selectmen to discuss, and then the selectmen will move it to referendum. The duties of the Board of Finance on the budget. I think there should be several changes there. And again, there's a lot of those. And I won't go through them because they'll be very
Boring.
confusing and boring and everything else. But, I think the Board of Finance should be given a little bit more flexibility when it comes to the budget. Again, our budget, we have the ultimate say of the residents by going to referendum. So I think the Board of Finance should be able to be given the tools to produce the type of budget that they think is in the best interests of the residents, and the residents ultimately have to say whether they want to have that budget or not. With that being said, I think it's time that we stop the bifurcation of the budgets, and we start to look at the Board of Education as a department, just like Public Works, just like the police, and stop singling them out. I think there was a time for that, but I think that time has passed. We are working very hard to merge services between the municipal side and the Board of Education side, and we shouldn't have to say side. It should just be, there's a technology department for the town, there's an operations department for the town.
Agreed.
So I think it's time that we did that. Yeah. Yes. Yes, one question. Yep. No. WPCA has their own operation now. We made changes in the last charter revision that essentially put them out onto their own. So the budget that they present to us should simply be advisory only, so we know what's going on. Yeah. Yep.
I like to make the record that was stupid change,
Well, thank you for your input.
just thought I'd let you know.
All right.
It'll reflect it in minutes.
Yeah. Rory, could you make sure Emery used the word stupid?
Stupid change.
Okay.
Should never have done that.
Okay, so again, we talked about Chapter 13, the town meeting, with regards to, changing the quorums and things like that. I think that should just be completely removed. I think the threshold for special town meetings should be increased from 50,000 to 100,000. We shouldn't have to have a special town meeting to purchase a truck for Public Works. We shouldn't have to have a special town meeting for, to buy a specific piece of equipment. With the cost of things rising, I think we need to increase that amount. Obviously, people should have say if we're going to spend a substantial amount of money, and I don't think $50,000 is a substantial amount anymore when you're talking about pieces of equipment and needs like that. Let's see. Again, we talked, then we get into some of the special acts. So, again, that's kind of a quick overview. I'm going to provide my entire packet directly to the Charter Revision Commission and to Brian, so that way he can go through it. Yeah, so we'll have that emailed over to you tomorrow. So those are the things that Rory and I just went through with a kind of a quick pass, some of the issues that we think are important that need to be changed. So thoughts, comments?
I just have one thing.
Mhm.
Just reading through this. Section 22, right?
Section 22.
Yep. And I don't know if it can be changed. I just have a question on it.
Section 22.
I'll let you get there.
Right of the Housatonic Company to maintain fixtures and streets?
Right. In addition to the right, powers, privilege, and franchises granted the Housatonic Public Services Company, is that I mean, they're not there.
Brian, these are the special acts section that she's talking about? Yeah.
So it's just an addendum for informational purposes then?
All right. Because it says they maintain the fixtures and streets.
I can't speak to that because we just bought all the streetlights
Yeah.
last week, so.
It does note in here that it's specifically only for historical purposes, so I don't think it really matters anymore.
Okay. I did see that. Yeah. I was like, what? Nice.
I wouldn't be against that. That's right, especially when we're paying mileage. Okay, so who wants to add? Discuss, disagree, agree?
I will inquire, and I think I've inquired about this before. So what you say, if we pass everything that you've recommended on to the commission, does that imply that everyone on the Board of Selectmen agrees? I don't know if this is a legal question or...
You can individually submit ideas to the Charter Revision Commission. You can jointly pass a recommendation on to the commission that you all agree on certain things. It's up to you. It's not binding on the commission in any way. It's more
Right.
advisory, something for them to think about, look at. It will come back to you, as you know, once they're done with the draft report, after the public hearing, for you to accept or reject. They can reconsider. They can then come back again. So you could do it, if you all agree on something, you could send that as your unanimous recommendation. If you don't, it could be Kurt's individual recommendation. It depends. It's up to you folks how you want to do that.
And that's what I plan to do. Anything we
Sure.
don't agree on, I'll
Okay.
just go and present myself.
So considering their meeting is tomorrow and they are eager for an answer,
Well, I'll talk about that too. We're going to be meeting. We met last week as well. We have, I think, at least two meetings every month at this point.
yeah.
Try to time it. We have a timeline to get us right through next year. We'll be meeting at least every other week. So, I mean, it's not urgent that we have everything for tomorrow. They plan on starting at the front of the charter
Yeah.
and going through X number of pages every week, kind of chronologically through it, as opposed to just shotgun all over the place doing things. So,
Well, I mean, I've heard from several that think it's pretty urgent that we get something to them. I don't know if it's as urgent as tomorrow night, but all I keep hearing is this is going to take us 10 years if the Board of Selectmen doesn't tell us what to do.
I think they'd like to have something to start. As they start, they'd like to hear something from you so that they have nothing, and then with the fear that you give them everything 3 months from now when they're well into it, they've had a lot of debate and
Right.
vetting, and then they have to
Right.
start going backwards and thinking.
That makes sense.
But I only agree with that to a point. Not what you're saying, Brian, but just their opinion of that. They should be taking this charge on. They shouldn't be waiting.
I agree,
For us.
but I keep hearing from,
know?
I would say at least half of the members that they need something from us.
So maybe they need a little more direction with the charge, Kurt, that they need to
Well-
dig in and.
Well, the
Possible that-
suggestion I was going to make is we hammer this out tonight. I've had an opportunity to look at everything that Kurt has proposed. I don't know if you guys have. So I'm willing to say what I agree with and what I disagree with. If we want to take another meeting to do that, that's fine too. But I don't think we should wait much longer than
Well,
that.
we have nothing else tonight, so we have about 5 minutes of other business, so.
Are we gonna go back down this end? 'Cause we,
Yeah, I mean, anybody
middle?
could talk at this point, yeah.
just if I could just put in my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I was charged to help with revise the charter, I think back when Paul Roy got elected. So this was 8, 9 years ago, whatever it was. And one thing, we were only given a specific portion of the charter to wrestle with and revise. But while flipping through the entire charter, the one thing that stood out to me is just the way it's organized. It's not in a outline form that's easily readable. It's not in a traditional outline format with Roman numeral 1 and then your large A or little, whatever that format is. I noticed that. So when we were talking about our section, it wasn't formatted properly. So I couldn't say section 5A2 is, it just wasn't done properly. It wasn't consistent throughout the document. So I don't know if it's still that way, but I would strongly suggest at the end, that's something you can do at the end, Brian, with the Charter Revision Committee, is just make sure it's in a logical outline form like a statute would be, or a term paper, or whatever you want to say, a thesis. That's one thing I noticed, that could probably be done at the end when you clean it up, but you're probably gonna have to track it as you go along. The other piece is, if they want some guidance, we're happy to give guidance, but I fear, I don't want to step on the toes of that committee. Like I said, they need to wrestle with it and dig in and do it. I don't think we should be the ones to tell them where to go, but if they're looking for some input, by all means, we should give them input and a starting point. I think that's only collaboration. That's only in the nature of good collaboration. We're all in this together to clean up the charter. So it definitely needs to be done, and I'm thrilled this is getting done by that team. God bless them. It's a lot. It's going to be a lot of work. But I think if they attack it, and Brian's there to guide them legally, they should be able to get through it and get it done for us. There are a lot of antiquated section, I noticed. There are some typos. There are things that are inconsistent. There's redundancies. All that stuff is pretty easy to sift through and get rid of with a couple of passes. So hopefully after they reduce the pages and reduce it down to the essence of what we still want it to be, then they could really wrestle with deeper concepts. But I think that initial task seems to be overwhelming because it probably is a lot of work initially to go through and do that. Because I remember attacking that one little section, it took me hours. And there were a couple of people on the committee that I was on, and it took a long time, and it was just 10 pages or 12 pages. It was just a mess. So, not that our charter is a complete disaster, but it definitely needs to be cleaned up. And so, those are my opinions.
Thank you, Al. Anybody else want to add anything? Because if not, maybe what we can do is, why don't we go down the list, my list of things, and maybe let's see what we agree to and what we don't, and maybe we come up with a list of 4 or 5 things,
Or how about,
at least to get them started
how
with.
about if people just say what they don't agree with? 'Cause your list is quite long.
Well, I'm going to kind of hit the big, yeah, the big,
Okay.
kind of the big target ones.
Well, in the spirit of what you said before you started presenting, why don't we just point them to certain areas
Well, that's what I mean.
and give our take? Because I thought it was kind of funny how you said, we're not going to get too deep into it, and then you said, let's go to
Oh, no,
section 9(1)(2),
Well, I was just-
paragraph 3, word 4.
Well, I was,
Strike that from the record, please.
well, I was kind of hoping that that would stimulate some discussion back and forth on those specific topics, but okay.
But that's the
All right.
kind of
I
stuff
thought it was funny.
I think we're getting at with
Funny ha-ha, or funny peculiar?
Both. Funny looking.
not getting into the
Wow. No, okay, never mind. So, all right, so, well, what, how about this? What don't people agree with then, big picture, not little minutia? So I talked a lot about boards
Yeah.
and changing the size of the boards. Do we all agree that, and we'll start with the elected boards first. Do we all agree that elected boards should be made smaller,
I agree.
or should be kept at their regular size?
I think it depends on the board.
Yeah.
It's a case-by-case
So-
analysis.
So let's do, should the biggest boards then, in our opinion, be the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Education, and should they all be 7?
I agree with that.
Yeah, go around. We'll go down the line. That's probably better.
I agree with the 3 boards, all being the same size, 7. I think once you start getting more than 7, it's just to get a quorum, to get stuff done, it's not gonna work.
Okay.
Group dynamics research shows that you don't want any more than 9 to 11 people on a board. So I think you're still in the sweet spot. It's just a question of having reasoning why you want to reduce it from 9 to 7 in certain situations and be able to back that up logically and why you want to do it. That's all. That's what I'd want to know.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Our
well, I can,
opinion of
again, I think we don't have enough people that want to participate in government.
Mhm.
And what we find is people get burned out because they're on 3 and 4 different boards because they have to be. So I'd rather take the extra 2 from the Board of Education, the extra 2 from the Library Board as an example, or extra 3 or 4, depending on the number we come. They can now shift over to other boards and fill other spots.
And in theory, that's a great thought, but
Because how many people here are on multiple boards? I mean, yeah.
Used to be.
I mean, we all serve on 4 and 5 boards, and people get tired. And they burn out quick, and then they don't want to do it anymore, and now we're scrambling around trying to find more people. I'd rather people could be on just 2 boards if that's what they want, and have an impact and an input, and, I don't know. So, again, just my opinion, you guys could
Well,
disagree
maybe
with me,
somebody
or-
on the Board of Ed doesn't want to be on the library board. Maybe that's the board that they want to be on.
But just because they want that doesn't mean we should have a ton of positions for them.
No, I agree, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that will, if your reasoning as to we can put them on other boards.
No, but I'm saying they could, at that point,
We just
provide
don't
other
have people that, we
opportunities.
just don't have people that are volunteering to be
Exactly.
on board. So this just shortens up the boards, and it gives us an opportunity to fill the boards. We're not begging people to get on boards.
Correct.
So I think 7 for Board of Selectmen, 7 for Library Board, 7 for Finance, and 7 for Board of Ed is reasonable.
But I even bring library down to 5.
Or, no, Board of Ed, no, that's staggered, yeah. Library are down to 5. Right, I think that's reasonable.
Because even, we all know we have problems filling tickets. I mean, it's not, you know. so.
Right.
Len?
Yeah, the only question I have with regard to that, I like the idea of the uniformity across, the 3 largest boards and then the smaller boards being smaller for the, pragmatic reasons you bring up. The only question I have is why was the Board of Ed originally created as a 9-member board versus is there some angle that we're not seeing? Historically, there may have been some reason. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, a lot of them are 9. One statute I know talks about 3, 6, 9, and 12 members, 6-year term, staggered, and 1/3 of the board after the election cycle. Another statute talks about not less than 3, not more than 12, 2, 3, 4, 6-year term. I know the other statute talks about 3, 6, 9, and 12 on the board, annual elections, generally.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have 4-year terms, 9 on agriculture, that number of statutes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you, Brian, we gotta be careful with
Right.
reducing that if we can't.
Now, the Board of Ed may give pushback because they have a bunch of subcommittees, and maybe they can't fill all the subcommittees with 7 people.
So that was going to be my
You know, that
take
could-
on this when it got to me. I don't want to change selectmen or finance. I think library should definitely come down. But Board of Ed, I struggle with dropping the number there simply because of the sheer number of subcommittees they have and the amount of days a month I know most of these people are putting in. I think if we drop it down to 7, and that puts another subcommittee on people's plates, you're looking at a lot of redundancy, and you're looking at just people not willing to put that kind of time and effort in, and the board may suffer for that.
Okay.
Now, I will say, appointed boards, I think capping all appointed boards at 5 is a good idea.
All right, everybody on board with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Len?
Yeah.
Okay, so Roy, we got one. We're on fire. We're rolling.
If I could add a caveat suggestion from myself, I would like to see all people wishing to be appointed to a board have to appear before the Board of Selectmen. I don't think it's right any longer for us to simply approve names on paper. For example, I've never met either of the 2 people that we are supposed to appoint tonight. I would like to have a chance to say hello to them, ask them what their motivations are, and hear from them why they wish to serve on whatever they wish to serve on.
Oh, well, I want to add a caveat to that. That's fine on like a regular meeting, but the first meeting of each new board will literally be there for 5 hours. Because, I mean, there's 60 or 70 people that we appoint. So if you want to talk to all 60 or 70 people, we're going to be there for some time. That might be a little too much.
I mean, maybe we could talk about breaking it up.
I mean, would a write-up be better, or, I mean, do you physically want to see
How about if they submit some?
the people? Because, I mean, again,
I mean, it's not for us to decide, but I would prefer to have people.
and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, don't get me wrong. We don't meet candidates that we hire for employment, but,
Well, I would like to see that too.
but that's what I'm saying, so, I mean, if we're going to do one, then we should probably do another?
I
Do
think
both?
I think anybody that we have to give an up and down vote on for approval, we should meet and talk to.
I do have one issue with that.
How
and
much of
it's-
that can we discuss, though? I mean, they want to essentially interview a person, we can't do that in public setting. No, for hiring, yeah.
Well, I think. Well, I was going to offer / compromise with reappointments can be the same way, but I think any new appointment certainly. I feel more comfortable attaching my name and my vote to a person that I can look in the eyes and ask them why they want to serve.
The next question is, you can require them to come, or if I can't be here because of work, if I talk to you about that's why voice on every day.
That's all well and good. I mean, are you going to put that in the charter, though? I mean, here's where I'm struggling with it. If that individual can't make it, and we need to make all of these appointments, if these individuals can't make it to our meeting, are we going to wait to appoint them at that point? Because if it's in the charter, we're probably going to have to, I would imagine. We could certainly do that, politically. I don't think we need to put it in the charter. That's one thing I like the idea, and I absolutely
Okay.
agree with
I've
the
actually-
thought
I've been-
process, but it's
this-
something that's tough.
This is an idea that I have been kicking in my head for 6 months at least, and I've been trying to think of the best way to bring it up. And once I found out about charter revision, I thought that this might be the best way. If it's not, if it's a rule of the Board of Selectmen, if it's an ordinance, I don't care what it is. That's just something that, because I definitely don't see myself continuing to vote yes on people I don't know. I'm just speaking personally, and I think that everyone here has a lot of incentive to know the person in some capacity that they are approving for a job or for an appointment, because if, say that person goes rogue and something happens, we're getting the blame in some way.
I definitely don't disagree with that. I mean, that's a good assessment of the issue. My nuance is, putting it in the
Fine.
charter would be problematic for
I don't know if I
Right,
disagree with that. It's
pragmatic reasons, but as far as making a rule or something
Well, maybe
amongst
we
themselves,
ask.
it probably would make sense.
I think that you also got to be careful that people are willing to volunteer for a board, and I don't think you want to put too much into that application process, other than, yes, we have to vet them, but I'm not sure that's the most
So-
time-efficient way to do it. Maybe you get a bio, maybe you have a committee at town hall that vets them first, instead of putting it before us, and we trust that board, and if we still disagree with it, then you don't appoint them and you don't move them forward, if that's your vote. But I'd hate to kind of chill the volunteerism, so to speak, of people who are willing to serve when we already struggle to get people to participate in our town government.
Right, well, that's the only reason I want to add this to reducing the size of municipal government. I also think that, to Kurt's point about EDC, that we should bolster some of these boards. I think it should be more of a commitment for people, and they should have more of an incentive to want to do it. And I also don't think, and I understand that there might be scheduling conflicts with somebody who works every Tuesday night, but I don't think it's too much to ask somebody to come to one Board of Selectmen meeting if they wish to serve their town on an ongoing basis.
So, with that being said, then, would you support, and I don't know if we can do this, but it doesn't matter what party a person is. So if we're going to bring a person in, and we're essentially going to interview them to make sure they're the right person for the job, or for the board or commission, then does it matter what party they're in?
I would say that's the only way I would ever consider agreeing with you saying, going along with removing partisan restrictions on appointees.
Is by interviewing every single person that we want to appoint to a board.
Yeah.
Or the first selectman wants to appoint to a board, or the Board of Selectmen wants to appoint to a board.
Yeah.
Is to interview every single
I don't,
person.
you say the word interview, and I
It's
think
an
that,
interview.
well, I think that implies that it's going to be a, 2-hour process. It might just be, tell me why you want to be on this board, and if it's a low impact board, it might be, okay, no problem. But I still think attaching a vote and attaching a name to something should actually mean something.
Okay.
And again, we don't have to agree on everything. That's just my
How do
feeling.
we, if we wanted to move something like that forward? Again, that's one I think we have to be very careful with, because, now, I'm not saying anybody on this group would, but I could see someone down the road abusing that, because they don't like the person that's in front of them, and they're gonna hammer them. And I don't think any of us would, but I have that concern that somebody wants a, political bone to pick, and, Rory gets put up for whatever board. I'm just using you.
Well, I think
You know what I mean?
I think I could make the exact same argument, though, about removing partisan restrictions. I think we might all feel the same way that, none of us would ever manipulate the system to put all Democrats or all Republicans on every appointed board, but that's not to say the next person won't.
Oh, no, agreed. Oh,
So-
absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
So I think you can't have one without the other, in my opinion.
Okay. Can you talk? Just grab the microphone. My mother will call you and yell directly at you.
So one of the things that we had discussed when we were talking about the party affiliation thing was when I ran for planning and zoning, then had to resign. We wanted to appoint Joe Zeal, who had previously been on the board and is an attorney and is pretty well qualified. but who was a Democrat. And because I had run as a Republican, we could not do that.
Right.
So he was willing to change parties. Not everyone would be willing to do that. So what we had said was to put in a mechanism, not necessarily to remove the party affiliation, but to say with a unanimous vote of the board to forego it in a given circumstance, or at least the party that would be changing, you know.
No, and in that case, I totally agree with you. I don't see a problem with that. It's just, I could never go along with something that would allow a majority vote of Board of Selectmen to override a party affiliation rule, because then you could easily manipulate the system. Not necessarily us or anybody here, but it could happen. And I think to maybe put a button on this, because I think I've said my piece, and I've heard the pushbacks, it's very easy just to tell them that this is something that was brought up. They're the ones who are going to decide on it anyways. It's not going to be us.
And so then we'll just put notes in, I guess, discussion of board makeup and process of how members are appointed. Is that?
Yeah.
So a process of how members are appointed.
And I
voluntary boards.
speak personally, I will be certainly visiting the Charter Revision Commission many more times, and I will get up at public comment and I will say exactly what I said here tonight to them, just so they're on the same, just we're on the same page.
Okay.
That's fine. I'll yell it from the back of the room if I have to.
I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
All right, so how about some of the finance ones? Let's talk about that. Are we all comfortable with the process of removing the annual town meeting for the budget and having it go from the Board of Finance, when they finish their work, directly to the Board of Selectmen, who in turn would then move it forward to referendum?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Is everyone okay with setting specific, and I know this is something that I didn't mention before, but setting specific dates for when the public hearing is and when the first referendum vote is? So I think one of the things that we struggle with is people don't necessarily know when the vote is going to be. It's kind of based on the Board of Finance and when they finish their process. I would rather say that the selectmen at their first meeting in April will move the budget forward to, and I'm just making dates up, will move the budget forward to referendum, and the first vote on our budget will be the third Thursday of April every year. So we put some definitive dates to things. I mean, we have a definite starting time, but we don't really have after that it just kind of gets jumbled, and I think people get confused.
I like the idea, except that there has to be a provision in there to provide some flexibility in case of a situation like what we're seeing right now with the state budget that's kind of sticking us.
Well, you call it like the
moving.
But
aiming date.
that would be yeah, so the selectmen could vote to not have that first vote, and then, and I'm just
Just a little
kinda-
bit of
I'm just-
flexibility.
I'm just making this up, but we generally vote every 2 weeks. So it would be the first, let's say it's the third Thursday of April.
You're proposing that when the selectmen vote, you're proposing a certain date when the first referendum will occur every year.
Well, I'd want it to be to the selectmen, and again, just in this example, for their first meeting in April, for them to either kill it and send it back to the Board of Finance, or move it on to referendum vote, which would be the third Thursday of April.
So you want to require the Board of Finance to have the budget to the Board of Selectmen by a date certain?
Yes. Does everybody agree with that, just to give it a little bit more?
Yeah, you don't think that'll affect how the Board of Finance, their ability to get a budget done?
No, I mean, they're generally done by that time anyway. I mean, the public hearing is in March, and that's set.
We put together
I think it was you and Kristen Harmon, right, that came up with something?
well, the strategic planning committee had tossed around the idea, so I put together, based on the current dates in the charter, sort of the last possible standard day. So everything happened on a Thursday,
Right.
and it was the last Thursday before the date set forth in the charter.
Right.
So something along that lines where it wouldn't necessarily rush the process because maybe, Board of Finance finishes early one year, but it's still, then there will just be 3 weeks of no action. That allows them to change their mind if they want to.
Okay.
Just the last a drop dead date, basically, for each step, but on a standardized day.
Yeah, because in the charter, the Board of Finance shall, on or before April 1st of each year, file with the town clerk such appropriations it recommends in the form of a proposed budget and a proposed tax mill rate. The Board of Selectmen shall call an annual town meeting no later than May 1st to recommend changes to the budget. So we're still staying within the time frame that we have. We're just saying, hey, the first meeting in April, the Selectmen are going to take action. The third Thursday, and again, I'm just making up days, will be when the first referendum vote, and it kind of mirrors what the charter already says. It's just more definitive as opposed to loose.
We're also proposing a date in the charter for the first referendum vote,
Yeah.
a fixed date.
I mean, just, Election Day is
Oh, no, that's
the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. I mean, you know when it is.
If you want to keep it on the day of the week, you can't do a date.
No, I'm saying, it's
Yeah.
it's the third Tuesday, or third Thursday.
First referendum to be the third Thursday of the month of April.
Yes. And the budget is due to the Board of Selectmen for their first meeting in April.
You mean May?
April. Because the
Okay.
selectmen
Oh, to
approve it
push
first,
Sorry. Right.
send it to referendum. Mhm. Yeah, that's up to everybody. I just want to have it a little bit more definitive than just easier. Yeah,
Yeah, this might be too in the weeds, but does it make more sense to do it on Tuesday? People are comfortable voting on Tuesdays.
You don't, I would just say, if you don't want it coming to you the same day you're going to vote on it, maybe if you get it on you're talking about the referendum or the date?
The referendum. The referendum.
Oh, I'm sorry.
oh, then if that case,
Sorry.
then I would make it the fourth Tuesday in April, because that's when the Board of Finance meets. So, I mean, they can do.
I don't care. I'm just
yeah.
asking the question.
Again, I don't care about the dates, the day, as long as it's
Yeah.
something. Everybody all right with that?
Mm-hmm.
Splitting of the budget.
I totally agree with you.
Yes, that needs to go away.
Yeah.
Put them together.
That's caused,
They need to come together.
That's
Yep,
right.
for sure.
Yes.
caused nothing but angst and
Yeah, right.
division in our community.
Right.
All right, so that's a definite.
To add on to that, is there anywhere in the charter that you see that we could further integrate the town and the Board of Ed?
No,
Yeah, I didn't think so, but
no, not that I mean, I can go back and double check, but I don't, that's mostly state statute that
That's to be
causes.
separate. and
Yeah,
distinct
Stefan, that's a good question, but for instance, I'll take HR, not to pick on a department or any department. You cannot force them to combine. Those are things you have to talk to them about, combining purchasing, combining HR,
Yeah.
combining snow plowing, things like that.
sure. I'm just asking.
No,
where we
because
can
all you're
combine.
giving them is a set amount of money for them to do
Yeah.
what they choose to do with it, how they're going to apply it to education, maintenance of facilities, administrative tasks, computers, things like that. You can discuss combined services.
Okay. Thanks. I knew we could.
Okay, and then, let's, term limits, let's talk about that, or lengths of terms, because that's something else that came up. Do we think there should be term limits? And let's just say term limits in general, not a set amount, just yes or no?
On what? I know you said.
On
Elect-
any elected official, should there be term limits, just a yes or a no?
I say no.
I say no.
I don't think there should.
All right, so 2 noes.
And it's more for pragmatic reasons of finding people to run for specific. Finding people to run for specific offices can be a very difficult task. And in a small town like ours, if we start to limit the amount of terms that people can serve, you're going to run out of people willing to run really fast.
Right.
Something like the Board of Selectmen, or actually Board of Finance, which I served on, was a lot more meetings, especially during budget season. There's not many people who actually want to serve on that board. You put a term limit on there, you're going to have a real hard time finding people to run for that board.
Okay.
I think it depends on what the term limit is. Like
Okay.
your suggested term limits.
You're a yes, Nicole?
I agree.
You agree?
I don't want term limits, no term limits.
Okay. So I'm undecided.
So Mike, so I
Um,
want to hear more.
I mean, I see both sides of the argument, how they make sense. I see both sides of the argument, how they're bad.
Mhm.
But I think every 2 years, you go through kind of the ultimate job, I guess, review. If you're doing a good job, I guess you stay. If you're doing a bad job, you're not. But it is substantially easier in a small town once you're in a position to keep that. I mean, I understand that as well, so. All right, so let's put a pin in that for the time being. What about lengths of terms? Should they stay? And let's talk selectmen and Board of Selectmen, and we'll kind of go from there. Or first selectmen and then regular selectmen.
So,
Should they stay 2 years? Should they increase to 4? If we increase them, should there be some type of recall provision? What's everybody's thoughts on that?
I think 2 years, it's hard to make any changes. Because the first year, you're just trying to get up to speed on everything. And by the
Mhm.
time you get the momentum going, you're thinking about the next election.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not 2 years, maybe 3 years, or maybe 4 years.
Well, I think it would have to be even years,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't want to get mixed up with state elections or
True.
presidentials.
Forgot about that. So go 4 years, because then by the 4 year, by your second year, halfway through, you pretty much have your game plan. So your third year, you're getting it going, and the fourth year, they have to measure you on.
Okay.
Is what my thoughts are.
Nicole?
I agree
4?
with what Anne Marie said, yes, 4.
Okay. Al?
I'd like to see data on that, what other towns do, before I make any,
The towns are all over the map.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd like, but
They're
I'd
all
like
over
to
the
see
map.
that. What are similarly situated towns like Seymour, what do they do? Similar population, similar,
All the towns in our
town
immediate
government.
area are 2 years.
they are too.
Yeah, but there are towns, a lot of towns and cities that are 4.
But a lot of them also don't have their elections in November. Some of them have their elections
May,
at times, I think.
Well,
May
yeah,
elections. There's only a handful that do May
Yeah.
elections.
Um,
So,
Well, yeah, I don't really have an opinion on it. I'd like to see the data on it, pros and cons.
I actually don't, I'm torn between 2 and 4. I see the benefits of both. Frankly, at this point, I have no opinion on it.
okay. Steph?
Sure, as you know, I am a proponent of a 4-year term. However, I could never personally sign off on a 4-year term without term limits.
Okay.
So what would you say is a term limit then?
Well, I
4
think,
years? Should, one term of 4?
no, I think, I suggested this at the public hearing, but I said anywhere from 2 to 5 I would be comfortable with, 2 to 5 terms, 4-year terms.
So that could be up to 20 years.
Could be,
8 to
Yeah.
20 years.
could be. I don't think I would go that high.
That's a term limit.
I think my sweet spot would be 3 terms of 4 years if I were, the king. But it's just
It just dawned on me what you said.
That was fun.
it'd be interesting, right? A king that only wanted to serve 12 years. But just to counter Len's point a little bit about term limits, if I may, I think in a town with over 11,000 registered voters, if we can't find a few people every few years that want to run for a board, the town is doing a bad job of communicating, and the parties are doing a terrible job of recruiting. So, and I would not say, you serve 2 years and then you're done for life. Maybe you come back after a term off.
Well, all right, so let's dig into that. So I
Go serve on another board.
served my 2 terms, let's say, on the Board of Selectmen. Next election, can I run for the Board of Finance?
Yeah, I would say yes.
So it's just that term limits to that specific board.
It's a specific position, yeah.
Then
But I also
after you-
think every town has that same issue we have, getting people to run for boards.
Yeah.
We're not special in any way.
But I don't think putting
I don't
term
think
limits
we
on
are
is going to
special.
change.
We are special.
Seymour had term limits back in the early, 2000s. They used to be 3 2-year terms. Well, for the first selectman was the only one that had term limits. It was 3 2-year terms. So maybe, taking the kind of the best of what both Stefan and Len said, maybe the term limits only apply to the first selectman's position. Sorry.
I would actually be fine with that. My thinking is primarily with the boards. It is very difficult to find candidates, and I understand maybe you're doing a bad job, I guess, if you're a party head trying to recruit for candidates, but my experience in some of the other towns that I've dealt with over the years in other capacities is that every town has this issue, just like Nicole just said. Beacon Falls does, Ansonia does, Derby does it. It depends on the time frame and the pool of candidates, people willing to do a service. And I know that people nowadays are much less inclined to give their time, or to volunteer their time for what can sometimes be a very thankless position, Board of Finance being, the thing that comes to my mind immediately with that sense. So if the term limits are only applied to a first selectman's position, yes, I could see that actually working, and I'd be more inclined to support that than I would be for any of the other boards or commissions.
That's fair.
And to go back to your thing about the term limits, so, and to Kurt's thing, so he's a first selectman, then he goes to the Board of Finance, right? Could he then run again for the,
Yeah,
whoever,
well,
Board
I
of
think,
Selectmen?
yeah, I
If you
think
did
it's
3 4-year
non-consecutive.
terms, then, if that's what we did it for first selectman, then you can run for Board of Finance and
Come back 4
come
years
back and
later.
run, do.
Yeah, if you
another
did a
3
good
4-year
enough
term.
job, and then people
Consecutive, so
want
that's
you
it.
back.
I don't have a problem with that.
All right, so
Good idea.
so do we have,
My suggestion would extend to the selectmen. I'm fine with Board of Finance, Board of Ed, if you guys want to not have a term limit on those, but I think anyone with the name selectman should have a term limit.
what are your thoughts on the first selectman is 4 years with 3-year term, or 3-year term limit, and the Board of Selectmen is 2 years with, let's say, a 6-year term
A
limit.
6-term?
Six term limit. So now that both would be a maximum of 12 years.
I think that's a good way to do it. I would like that.
That's fine.
I mean, Anne Marie's been here the longest.
It's fine.
We're trying to get rid of you, Emery.
longer than
Specifically,
that.
we're targeting you. We want you gone.
Really?
I'm 6.
I think that's
I'm
reasonable.
9,
If
so
you're
you
gonna
have to be
it's
11.
12 years. Who really wants to be on more than
I mean,
12
so
years?
Anne Marie's
I
been,
don't know,
Anne Marie's
but-
actually been 11 years, because I'm 9, she's 11.
I'm not targeting you. There's people on
Right,
other
right,
boards who have
right.
been here a lot longer than you.
No, oh, no, I'm just using that as an example.
No, I know.
And people in other towns, mayors of other towns for their entire lives.
Yeah,
20 years.
Prospect, Wallingford.
Wallingford.
Shelton.
But,
Yeah.
but,
As somebody used to live in Wallingford,
Well, yeah, I mean,
the man did a good job when I lived there. Taxes were extremely low, and he developed the Route 5 corridor, and he was doing a great job. I had no complaints with him as a former resident. So there's something to be said for success, and you don't want to punish somebody for being successful either. So I'm not really
I don't-
sure
I don't
what
disag- I
the
don't
whole
dis-
purpose of the term limit is, really. I'm struggling with I am. The people vote you in, they're letting you know whether or not they want you on. And if you're not doing a good job, they're gonna vote you off. I don't know. You have 11,000 registered voters, they don't all come out. That's just the way it is. You can beat the drum now till tomorrow to get people to come out. We always try to push it, get out and vote, and you don't get a huge turnout usually. So it's just, I don't know if it's apathy or people can't make, I don't know what it is, but,
Well, I think the easy counter to that is that such a small percentage of people vote. It may be a little disingenuous to say that the voters really want somebody to continue, if it's only a small portion.
but you still have a right to vote and get out. So
Sure.
I can't control whether people go out or not. So I don't think it's disingenuous. I think those are the facts. People don't come out and vote. And if they come out and vote in small numbers, those numbers still count. Whether 100 come out or 100,000, that's it. That's our democratic process, whether you like it or not. That's our experiment, and it's been going on for 200 plus years. So, is what it is. I'm not sure I'm seeing the point of term limits personally.
I'm not getting it.
Okay.
I haven't heard a really good, valid argument for it yet. That somebody's been in so long, and has abused the process, abused their station.
Abuse of power, fear of not having a true voice in the process. I'm not sure what the concern is.
Well, I think the president has term limit. That's a pretty good one right there.
That's a federal post. That's not a municipal
But
post.
Congress,
Okay, but-
Senate doesn't.
Sure.
And that drives me crazy, because we have some Senate.
And I would
can't
say
even
that
feed themselves.
Congress and Senate should have
Yet they're
term
still
limits.
there.
I think the point is that any incumbent has a massive advantage, regardless of the job they're doing. Doesn't matter what party they are, where they're at. It's statistical. It's a statistical fact that an incumbent has, and the longer they stay, the more of an advantage they get. I don't.
I don't know about that.
I mean, Tell me somebody who's been in for 20 years that gets unseated.
Joe Crisco.
Joe Crisco?
Well, he wasn't in for 20 years, but he was in for a long time,
Yeah. Yeah.
so.
Nancy
it happens.
Johnson.
Listen, that's part of the democratic process, you know? You vote, you choose not to vote, then you don't vote.
All right, so where are we on this one? Is it something that we want them to look at?
I'd like them to wrestle with it. I don't think it's up to us to wrestle with it for 3
Yeah.
hours.
All right, so we don't have a recommendation per se on the length of a term or term limits, a number of, but we think it's something that they should definitely discuss, the length of terms and the potential of term limits.
Right.
We all agree to that?
I'd like to hear what they have to say.
Kurt, all these things, your list of suggestions, I mean, can't you just put them in as that? They're just suggestions.
Well, they can be my suggestions, because I don't think everybody's going to agree with everything that
Right,
they have.
but I'm
They're
saying, I don't think,
definitely
right,
suggestions. We're
but
not
I'm saying, it
telling them
doesn't
to
have
do
to come from, unanimous or not from the board. Say, listen,
Oh, agreed.
just, here they are, you do with what you want,
Right, but if there's anything that we all agree on,
right?
I want them to know that, hey, all 7 of us, all 6 of us that are here agree that these are things absolutely. And then anything other than that will just be me. This is what I think from my position as first selectman. So is there anything else big that I missed?
Hypothetically, if you did want them to adopt term limits, is that a lifetime exclusion or a one-term off of the board before you can come back on and start
We
the
just
clock
said one
running
term
again?
off of the board.
One term off.
I have a question, too. When you talked about boards and commissions, about numbers, for example, the Memorial Day Committee, to bring that down to 5 people, don't we need
Oh.
more than, it would be tough
Yeah.
to only have 5 people on those types of committees?
That's why I think you have to look at it on case by case. You can't just start chopping.
Well, no, so then maybe would it be boards and
Just boards,
commissions versus committees, you know what I mean?
right? Yeah, we
And then-
cannot we don't have to put committees in there at all.
Right.
Right.
And then if they're getting appointed to committees, going back to Stefan's thing, if they're being appointed to a committee, like the Memorial Day Parade,
I don't know if we even have a
Are we
limit
gonna
on that
pull
committee.
them
We
in?
just,
Oh, good, okay.
Right.
okay.
That answers that.
right. Okay.
Well, I guess to that point, are there any committees or commissions or boards that we're recommending be pared down to 5 that really, probably from a realistic point of view, shouldn't be?
Library, no.
Why don't we leave that to the
To the,
charter
yeah,
commission,
right.
Let me take a
the
look.
the revision committee to tell us what they think.
Maybe the request is look to potentially reduce, depending on the circumstances.
I mean, they have like 9 months to sort this stuff out. We're
Yeah.
trying to do it in an hour.
2
you
hours,
know?
yeah.
Oh, it's just recommendation.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're good with that one. Anyone that we missed? I mean, big ones. I mean, I'll go through and,
Pick the big one.
so, okay, big
If you
one.
want, okay.
Wouldn't it be possible to have a joint meeting with,
Them?
yeah,
No. Well, I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but no. Because we don't want to have undue influence on them.
Yeah,
We
I
want to
don't think
make
we
our
should do that.
suggestions, and we want to,
It's their, it's their.
well, yeah,
charter.
I mean, you
Their-
can go and make your suggestions directly to them. But I wouldn't want to have a meeting with them. So what about the so an easy one, the elimination of the Parks Commission and the Recreation Commission and combining it all into one Community Services Commission?
Yes.
That sounds efficient.
Emery? And then the elimination of the commission from the aging and rolling that all into the Livable Communities Commission.
Yes.
Is that a yes or no?
yes.
Okay, Al says yes because he wasn't paying attention. He loses,
Kathy, and a
he loses
sidebar.
his ability to vote.
Apparently the Yankees won.
Yankees won?
I'm a little distressed right now.
It's 2-2?
They won.
Oh, Lord, my friends are going to be so obnoxious. Removal of the Sewer Use Rate Review Board
Absolutely.
I have no idea what that is, but I say yes.
and the Redevelopment Agency? If anybody can
Yeah.
tell me right now what the redevelopment
Yes,
agency
yes,
is.
yes.
Redevelopment of what?
That's my point. Okay.
Jimmy Carter? Advise that.
Okay. Removal of culture and arts from the charter?
From the charter.
Just from the charter?
Just from the charter.
Yes.
What's the reason for that again? I'm sorry, I must.
I'm not even sure why culture and arts is in the charter, to be quite honest.
Where is it established? Is it by ordinance or
10.25, I would rather see them be by ordinance.
is there an ordinance now, or would we have to pass an ordinance to?
I think we probably have to pass an ordinance. Is there? Okay.
If
Yeah.
they're in the charter, we have.
Well, we don't, I mean, there's no ordinance for, I don't know, the building committee. They're not in the charter and they still function.
Well, the Board of Selectmen can actually establish a board, right?
Yeah,
Anytime.
establish and remove, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so.
But, I mean, if it's in the charter, we can't remove them. Right.
Which we don't want.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Allows more flexibility, not having that.
All right, so Culture and Arts Commission gone. And then the other one, the limit for special town meetings, when it comes to finances, increase from 50,000 to 100,000. All right, well, I was thinking.
That's a cap?
No, if it's anything less than 100,000,
It's a trigger
it has to go to a special town meeting.
Oh,
Or, excuse me, anything above 100,000 would have to go to a special town meeting. Right now, it's anything above 50,000 has to go to a special town meeting.
Basically, a dump truck makes you go to town
A 550 with a plow, that's not in the budget, makes us
That's not
have
in
to
the
go to,
budget.
that it makes us go to special
So
town meeting.
things can't get passed without people knowing and having a voice whether they want that or not.
If we,
Is that what that protects for?
if we buy 2 police cars
Yep.
right now, out of budget, we have to go to a special town meeting for that. And how many people show up to special town meetings?
Not
When was the last time we didn't act in lieu of?
meeting. It's incredibly rare.
So that's why I think it should be, that should definitely be increased.
many. Okay,
Sure.
that makes sense then.
Then the other thing that,
100,000's like 0.2% of our budget.
yeah, I mean, it's next to nothing.
It's not that much.
And then the other thing we talked about is changing the quorum. Do we want to keep the quorum at 50, or do we want to increase the quorum to 100? Yes. Or for any town meeting, for that matter.
We'll let people get 50.
What was the original impetus for 50? I mean, is it just an arbitrary number
It's
they
an
pulled
arbitrary number.
out of thin air?
I think it kind of goes back to the justices of the peace. It was just a number that was pulled out of the sky. Not the new one, I'm saying the original one. Yes.
Could it be a 1% of the total population of the town, or total voting population of the town, or something that's more tangible than,
As defined by the last census.
yeah?
I would say
So
leave it at 50.
That'd
In
be
that case, it would be 100 and what?
60, 165?
Total number of voters is
Oh, so
8,000, so you're talking 80 people at that point,
yeah.
as of the previous year. I mean, I'm just, to have a number that actually makes sense instead of just 50 or 100.
Well, if we did 1%, you're looking at somewhere between 80 and 100 people anyway.
Yeah.
I'd prefer to leave it at 50. It's up to me.
I mean, I'm not married to either, so it's just something I threw out. I mean, we can't get 50 anyway.
All right.
So if
But,
you
I mean,
can't
the-
get 50, why are you gonna push to 100?
But I think-
But to the point you brought up, though, so now I'll give the
Yeah.
counter argument.
To your point.
Firemen want a fire truck,
Yeah.
50 of them are gonna flood the room, and they're gonna totally dominate the meeting, they're gonna get whatever they want. So,
But if there's an issue that, to your point, if we normally get 1 to 3 people, if something brings 50 people out, maybe it's worth letting them have some say.
but should 50 firemen be able to force an issue like that? I mean, that's one of the reasons why we went away from the old way of voting on the budget. It used to be, at a town meeting, people would show up, whoever showed up voted. And you would have meetings that were controlled by blocks of people because they would turn out. So,
This is a hot button issue
Fair point.
for that group.
and there was one year, this goes back 15 years, I want to say. It was there was a fire truck that we didn't put on. The firemen showed up and they blocked the budget.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's why we went to the referendum vote, so it takes that away.
Well, let's let them decide.
Okay.
This,
So then, Rory, just a discussion on the number of people that make up a quorum for any town meeting.
With the history, I would think people on the commission would know, with a little history lesson behind it, as to make an informed decision as to whether to move it or not.
And then the last one, it's cutting into my bedtime tonight. The police department. The removing the captain and the lieutenant from the charter,
But they're not there anymore, so. But it's in the charter.
it's in the charter,
Get it out.
right? And then changing the paragraph, the fourth paragraph with regards to the chief, where it says the chief shall be required to have a 3-year contract, which will detail the terms of employment, blah, 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 blah. So that's good?
yes.
Yep, so we're good on
Sure.
both? Yes. Yep, and it's just a changing of the language that's there on the contract. All right, anything else? Everybody's good?
One thing sorry.
No?
One thing I would like to disagree with is allowing the first selectman to be elected to multiple positions. I don't think anybody should be able to be elected to multiple positions at any level. But that's just my feeling.
That's fine with me, because it wouldn't impact me.
Right.
But I know there are some towns, and, you know, if you can be a senator and a first selectman, it definitely benefits the community.
Yeah, I think we got enough
You know?
on the plate of a first selectman here.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but it just gives you a little extra. I mean, I know there's one senator and first selectman that has an awful lot of authority for a tiny little town. So, it's just, like I said, this would be for whoever followed me. I don't want it, so. But,
I think
oh, so that's a no?
I think my concern would be you want people focused on what goes on in our community,
Hmm?
not just, because it's a lot of work. Get us Nicole, it's a lot of work to go up to Hartford, especially from where we are, so it's definitely something to think about.
Now, the charter, I believe, says no, I believe it says paid elected position. So you maybe should have that discuss changing the language. Because Rich and I talked about this a while ago. Well, no, that if they didn't take pay.
Right.
Like, they can get elected to a position that didn't pay. No, they could get, if there was a state office that you could run for that didn't pay you, it's kind of vague in there.
So would it,
So, yeah.
Gotcha. All right, yeah,
Yeah.
something pointed to.
and would it allow, you know, not him, but would it allow the first selectman to, the way it's written, forego the pay of the state senator or state rep, and then still be clear?
Rich thought no, that they couldn't do that, that because state senator, state rep is paid, it's automatically eliminated, that you couldn't
Okay.
do that. But I just would rather make it clear in the charter at that point, then it should be no elected position. Does that make sense? Yeah, state, federal.
I mean, in fairness, you brought it up that you would like to change it, so if you say yes.
No, I like
say-
it something they would like, that they should take a look at.
Okay.
I think it's worth discussing, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just don't want it to be like, I said
I don't
that
want
I
it-
shouldn't do it, and then other people think that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think they should look, but I don't want, if they choose to do it, it should be for the next first selectman.
Okay.
Right. All right, anything else? Put my pen down now. Good?
We have, don't publish the full ordinance changes on there, because
Oh,
you
yeah.
didn't bring that up the next time. I say yes on that if it's any kind of issue.
Don't publish the full ordinances.
Agreed, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I figured that'd be one we all agree
In our
on.
minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it'll still be said, there's changes to the blight ordinance, and they can go in. Yeah. That was him, not me. He's the English major. Yeah. All right, so Stephen, anything else we've missed that list?
No, I'll stop now.
No, if there's more, let's,
No, I'm good, thank you.
okay. Len, you're good? Anne Marie? Nicole? All right, giddy up.
Okay, I have one more thing, I'm sorry. I forgot this one. In the
I thought
charter.
he was kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. Sorry, I missed it. The first selectman, in the charter says the first selectman shall appoint a secretary from the Board of Selectmen. Who is
Oh, I
that?
did see that.
Who is that?
I believe it's Bruna.
Was that ever appointed?
Yeah, I believe
It's in the charter, so, and it just struck me as odd.
I honestly believe
Yeah, I
we
saw that.
appointed Bruno back in 2011, and it hasn't changed.
I think we should take it out because we don't use one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't really use it. I was taking notes. I was taking all kinds of notes that first meeting, and then I was told I didn't have to,
Yeah.
and somebody was doing it. I think it was D at the time.
Yeah.
Sure, let's
He's
Yeah,
like,
we
don't
used to
worry
debate.
about it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's fine, we all.
It's that big stipend.
Big money.
All right, no, that's a good one.
Wait a minute, let me give it all
All right,
back.
so we all agree to that, we want to fire Al. Or make Al start taking the minutes. All right, so that was a good discussion. All right, number 8, appointments. So let's hammer through these last few parts and we will be done. Gail Catlin, Comcast Advisory Board, reappointment, 4-year term, expires 10/17/2021. Len and, who's that? Nicole? Discussion?
What is that?
That is for Comcast. They decide on programming that they have, it's the old Valley Cable Board. So they make, I'm dead serious, they make recommendations to, for local access programming and other things that are offered by, now it's Xfinity, and the local stuff. Low division? No, just, yeah. What, with the old Channel 10, I guess, when we were,
Jerry J.
when we were kids and stuff. Gail and Paul have been on this board since it was Valley Cable. They've been on forever. They've been on forever. But these are two of the people where you don't want to have term limits. Because you get some of these boards that you won't find anybody to do them. This is one of them, so. Okay, hearing no other questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, chair votes aye, motion passes 6-0. Paul Tontini, Comcast Advisory Board, reappointment, 4-year term, expires 10/17/2021. Anne Marie and Nicole, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, chair votes aye, motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much. Item number 9, tax refunds and abatements, Len.
The following overpayment of tax payment in total of $1,835.23 needs to be approved for refund in accordance with the provisions of Section 12-129 of the Connecticut General Statutes. Dated at Seymour, the 12th day of October 2017. Susan Boland, Assistant Tax Collector.
Thank you, Len. I'll entertain a motion to accept the October 12, 2017 Tax Collectors Report as presented. Motion by Nicole, second by Anne Marie. Any discussion? Everybody checked? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, chair votes aye, motion passes 6-0. Item number 10 is transfers. We have no transfers before us tonight. Item number 11 is correspondence. We have a few things in your packet. First is a memorandum that was sent to all municipal building officials from the state building inspector making some changes to the closure of certain building permits. We have a letter that Rich sent to Amy Lynch, who is the philanthropic client manager for the Catherine Matthews Trust, breaking down the grants for the previous year. The town is looking very heavily into the activity of the Catherine Matthews Foundation, and we are also looking at the possibility of trying to move the Catherine Matthews Trust to the Valley Community Foundation. But I think that's going to be an extremely heavy lift. And then finally, what was handed out tonight is a legal opinion written by Town Labor Counsel Warren Holcomb with regards to drug testing of our employees. Our drug testing program hasn't been updated since 1996. We are in the process now of revamping that program. My plan is to bring that to you at our next meeting, which will be on November 8th. I asked Warren to provide a legal opinion as to who we should and should not be testing. And you can see it's a 6-page document, so Warren went into a great amount of detail, citing cases, making reference to what we can or can't do. So again, my plan on November 8th is to bring a draft to you for approval and discussion. Okay. So that closes correspondence. We'll move on to item number 12, which is public comments. Mr. Flynn, to the microphone you go. You all set there, Brian?
What's that? Oh, Michael Flynn, 85 Skokorat Street. You know, seeing it is so few people show up at town meetings, maybe Board of Selectmen is an anachronism. Maybe we should consider Mayor Board of Alderman type government someday, you know?
That actually reminds me of something I wanted to add, but continue on, Mr. Flynn.
I think I think we've probably outgrown our being a town. We should consider Mayor Board of Aldermen, you know? Should be something to be considered for future reference. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Can I go back and make a comment and ask the board to add to it, or no? Or do I have to stand up and do it during public comment?
Move to suspend the rule. You can go back and do it again.
Thank you. Is that okay?
Second.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that's the one thing I wanted, Mr. Flynn reminded me. Town manager form of government. Do we think Seymour should have a town manager? Because that was a question that was voted on the last time that it was put out to the people. The people voted no. It was about 60-40 on that, but I don't know if things have changed in the last, 6 years that it's been since that? So is that something that we think we should have? Because that's something I can actually make an argument for.
I think it's too recent in time to revisit it, to be honest.
Okay, so anyone?
I'd actually be in favor of taking a look at it myself.
No? Okay. All right, so that'll just be a Kurt Miller on his own. Okay, thank you. So we can unsuspend the rules.
Okay.
All right, any other public comment? Microphone.
Get up.
Microphone. Microphone. Microphone.
Can't hear you.
They won't be able, they can't hear you.
His mother won't see you or hear you.
Mom, you can call Alex directly.
If you look in your office, now, if you look in your office, I gave Bob the original Kathy Mathis with her, well, not with her, but
We have it.
the original one I gave
Yeah,
with Brian Barrett's signature on it.
yeah.
Original what?
Where
Trust
the money's-
document.
Where the money's supposed to go.
The original,
box?
Yes.
the original
The
trust.
lockbox?
Okay, we can't have
I
conversation.
don't know what he's saying.
No, the
The original trust document.
document. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yes, we have that.
When are you supposed to-
Rich has it, yes. Thank you, Alex.
No problem.
Okay, any other public comment? Okay, hearing no more additional public comments. Selectmen's public comments.
No, thank you. I think I've spoken up tonight.
Gave us a little tease, though, the way you pushed the microphone. Len?
I'm gonna
That's
pass.
right. Len's passing. Al?
Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Anne Marie? Yeah, we're getting a little punchy now. Nicole? Okay. Rory, anything we missed? Brian, anything you'd like to add? With that, I'll...
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
Wow, motion by Anne Marie, second by Nicole. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Chair votes aye. Motion passes 6-0. Mark the meeting closed at 9:10 PM.
Do we actually have to vote to close the meeting?